Hello? Hello, hello? Alright, let me get some links out. This is going to be a very simple, probably short stream. I tend to like to keep these short because I don't get how long streamers can keep their voice up for that long. Get to my channel and link this. Keep their voice. Alright, my channel. I'm probably doing it very dumbly, but who cares? Alright, so. Oh, there is somebody actually watching. Huh. Alright. Give me a second. Let me put it onto the Discord. Be a link. How's everybody doing? I might do a game another time, but I have things to say. I finally have content to talk about. Yep, give me a moment. Hello, Sean Furlong. If there's anything wrong with the audio, please let me know, or if the connection, because this is my first stream after moving to a new apartment. The internet is a little slower than the last place, because it's not included. All very fascinating, I know, but yeah. This is also, of course, a Q&A stream. You can ask me any questions that you wish. I don't really have any super chats or whatnot set up, so you can just ask me. So, I wanted to make this stream talk about, because as you're probably aware in the news last week or earlier this week, the Canadian government, Parliament, made the very wise decision to bring up an old man at a ripe 98 years old, who they touted out to give a standing ovation with Zelensky and Trudeau, who fought in World War II against the Russians, which, of course, given that most people are very, very ignorant when it comes to history, are just going to think, oh, great, Ukrainian hero. And, of course, there was, in the early and mid-20th century, a lot of Ukrainian resistance to what the Soviet Union was doing. During the Russian Civil War, there was an attempted independent Ukrainian state. I think in World War I, the Germans were, as part of their plan of what to do with Eastern Europe, were planning to make like a quote-unquote kingdom of Ukraine led by a German. But there was also another opportunity for Ukrainian independence during the 1940s. Can you guess when that was? Was during Operation Barbarossa, i.e. the Axis powers invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. This is apparently something that the Speaker of the House of Canadian Parliament and all of Trudeau's aides and all these people that are supposed to inform him of PR stuff like this didn't know. So, the guy that they brought up, Yaroslav Hunka, fought in what was known as the 14th Waffen-SS Grenadiers, which was a division comprised of Ukrainians that were fighting against the Soviets. So, you know, the two people that are really kind of epitomize the modern Western governments and give a standing ovation to the mortal enemy, the boogeyman of progressivism and liberalism, the Nazis, the dreaded Nazis. This was a person who not only was in World War II, but fought explicitly for the Axis powers in the Waffen SS. Oh, cool. You can watch this later. Yep. I hate channels. This is an aside. I sometimes watch the Adeptus Ridiculous Warhammer 40k channel, and they'll live stream sometimes, and just kind of, where they'll just, like, be painting a figure, and then they'll, sorry, I just finished eating. I needed to clear my throat. They'll live stream, and then, like, they'll just delete the live stream and say, hey, if you want to pay to hear this, like, live stream that required no effort, you can watch the VOD of it. I'm like, why would anyone do that? And what does it cost you to save the VOD? But anyways, so they give a standing ovation to a Nazi, or this is kind of what I wanted to clarify. Because, again, so many people are incredibly historically ignorant today, and ironic considering that you could essentially, for progressives or for the modern liberal understanding of the world, have a new BC and AD, BH and AH. After, I think you can know what person the H stands for. That history really begins, or the modern history begins in 1945 after World War II. Actually, I will get myself some water because I am self-sufficient. There, let me give you some ASMR, some water. Yes. Anyways. So, we have an entire society or political viewpoint centered on the Nazis were the bad guys and everybody else were the good guys. World War II was the defining event of the 20th century and of all history. And being such, Hitler is the ultimate bad guy. And this is not a apologist for Hitler. I don't like the man no matter what. Or I really don't like the man at all. Not least because of what he ended up doing, leading Germany to, and him being evil as well. But we'll get to that. So the point is that, for a public consciousness that has World War II as the most pinnacle event, Hitler and the Nazis as the ultimate evil, people are shockingly ignorant of what it is. Like, all of the... It's so cringe. Nothing makes me cringe more than hearing people try and teach history that is just factually wrong. It's like, there's that episode of Arthur, the PBS show, where his annoying, 6-year-old little sister, DW, starts being curious about science and how everything works. And so the brain, who, fun fact, I think in one incarnation of Arthur, Stephen Crowder did the voice of him when he was young. The brain takes her to a science museum, and, she leaves with what a 6-year-old who spent an afternoon at a science museum will understand about physics, and starts trying to explain to all her friends how science works, but she gets it all wrong. And much to Arthur's chagrin, because he's like, no, you're lying to these people, and you're an idiot. And so I hear the same thing when people try and teach history and they get basic facts wrong. And apparently this was the case in Canadian Parliament, wherein they just thought, oh, there's some random Ukrainian independence movement during World War II. We don't know, we can't just do a basic Google search of the basics of what happened. The map I have is literally the first image you can find if you look up World War II map of Europe. And anyway, so that people seem to be very ignorant about the event that they're apparently supposed to be the most educated about. So in short, let me learn you some stuff about World War II. And the funny thing is that, I went through my Wehraboo phase. The Wehrmacht was super cool. I'm not a Nazi, but I love the tanks. I read, when I was 15, 16, 17, I read Heinz Guderian's biography. I read a bunch of other German biographies of the war. I remember when I was at an Oktoberfest, I actually met a German veteran of the war. He was in his 80s, and he didn't really have any stories to say. To tell, because he was drafted right at the end. I think he was like part of the Flensburg government, which was like the brief German government that formed right before the full surrender. But I have met a German veteran of World War II. In one of the books I read was a German lieutenant, Wilhelm Lübeck, who had his biography of the war. He was on the Eastern Front, and he was in, I think, Army Group North. Yeah, the book's called At Leningrad's Gates. A lot of the German biographies of the war are actually really, really good, because they give a much more nuanced perspective than just kind of the whoever wrote the Band of Brothers books. Like, Band of Brothers is good, but I tried to read Stephen Ambrose. He wrote like Citizen Soldiers, which was supposed to be like an account of the general Western Front in World War II after D-Day, and it was just so boring and so dry, and like, ugh, did not recommend it. Band of Brothers is good, but a lot of the German biographies were very good. But anyways, what was I saying is, because when this happened in Canadian Parliament, you had, of course, the golden opportunity of a mass embarrassment for Trudeau and the Liberal establishment in Canada and the world, because, people had to keep, because it gives further fuel to the fire that, Putin, who was lying about this as well, that, Ukraine, the country led by a Jewish ex-comedian, is a Nazi state, and just a lot of crocodile tears about, the Azov battalion and all that. And, like, so you have this golden opportunity to just completely embarrass the West for a moment. Okay, depends on which Germans you're talking about, because if you read a lot of, like, the top generals, like Heinz Guderian, or like who's the Albert Speer, like, a lot of it was them trying to explain themselves and saying, like, we didn't like Hitler, we had nothing to do, and we didn't know about the Holocaust and all that. But obviously, like, if you're on the ones that are just like the on the ground soldiers or like lower officers, no, I believe them. I don't think they don't really have any reason to lie. Like, they weren't in the SS or any of that. But this golden opportunity has to get spoiled, of course, by conservatives, who have to come and start denouncing all these people as Nazis, as Trudeau was, of course, a Nazi. And then when it gets out, like, there's a tweet by Mudahar of Some Ordinary Gamers, the YouTube channel, and people saying, anybody that was involved with the Nazis needs to be shot. I don't care how old they are. And this, of course, shows the black and white view of there's Nazis and then there's not Nazis is, again, shows how little people really understand about World War II. So, like, the first thing that people really probably wouldn't know is that the Axis was not just Germany, Italy, and Japan. There was, as you can see in the map, there's the countries that were nominally allied to the Axis powers, to Germany. Now, you had countries that were puppet states of Germany, like Croatia and Slovakia, but you'd also had somewhat effectively sovereign states that were allied as well. Finland, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. And then you had, like, the occupied territories, Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Poland, and, parts of the Balkans. So, the way the Axis military was essentially broken down is you had the Wehrmacht, the General Armed Forces of Germany, who were not really explicitly politically aligned. I mean, they were swearing allegiance to Hitler and fighting for Germany. You had the Italian army, the Finnish, and the various national armies of the Axis powers. You also had the SS itself, which was under the command of Heinrich Himmler. They're the ones that were really predominantly the ones responsible for the horrific atrocities. They were the ones, putting children into barns, setting it on fire. They're the ones, running the concentration camps, the death camps. But you also had the Waffen-SS, which was a combination of both elite politically aligned German military divisions of Germany. There's like, I remember there was the 101st, I think, Tigergruppe, or one of them. There's like the SS Viking, a bunch of kind of LARPy named elite German divisions that were staffed by Germans or comprised of Germans. But you also had volunteer divisions comprised of the other nationalities of Europe who volunteered, and this is where it brings you to fight the Soviet Union. You had ones of Ukraine, the 14th Grenadiers. You had ones from Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. You had volunteers from Finland, Flanders and Wallonia, France. All not just the country. So yeah, countries allied to Germany and in areas occupied by Germany, with the notable exception of Poland, because whereas the German High Command was kind of considering collaboration with other Slavic countries and people in the Baltic states, they wanted to destroy Poland and the Polish people. Like, not even like that. That's why I think there's a scene in Bandit Brothers where they're ambushing a bunch of Germans, and like, oh, they're SS, and like the Germans are all surrendering, and they're like, trying to plead with it, going, oh, I'm Polish, and he's like, there ain't no Poles in the SS, because they're the Polish. The people that the Germans occupied, it really depended on that nationality and ethnicity. If you were Jewish or Polish, it was very, very bad, to say the least. If you were French or like Norwegian or Danish, the Germans didn't really mess with you that much unless you were Jewish or part of the resistance. And then a messy relationship, because of course there's the idea that Hitler wanted to expel or exterminate all the Slavs and resettle all of like European Russia with Germans. But when the Germans invaded in Operation Barbarossa, a lot of the peoples of the Baltic, Belarus, and Ukraine were welcoming them as liberators. And you kind of then basically the Axis, having this massive gift on their hands, were like, okay, we're going to start forming like these volunteer divisions. And the thing is, I'm echoing a lot of what I listened recently, Argent Templar and Distributus were saying on their streams talking about this, is because I know Dave, his ancestors were Danubian Germans, or Eastern European Germans that lived outside of Germany proper. Essentially what it came down to is, and why you can't just say, oh, everybody that allied themselves with Hitler or the Germans or the Axis powers were evil Nazis, is number one, no, not even every German soldier was some insane Jew-hating Nazi. Most of them were, of course, trying to fight for their country, and even today, like, there are still, like, German war memorials and memorials and graveyards for the Germans who fought in World War II, and the general consensus is, we're just leaving them alone. They're not, they aren't like war criminals. But the lost my train of thought. The question that the people of Eastern Europe had to answer, and it was harder for some than it was for others, was, okay, World War II is between Hitler and Stalin, and we, people and Ukrainians and people that were under the thumb of the Soviet Union, knew how horrible Stalin was. They would have lived through the Holodomor. Even in Poland, the Katyn massacre, which was really played up by German or Axis sympathetic propagandists, which was a mass murder of Polish officers by the Red Army after they invaded Poland in 1939, was, okay, we know Stalin has already killed millions of our people, and we hate communism. despise Stalin. Most of these people probably would have been Christian or raised Christians. Stalin would have murdered their priests, burned down their churches, and just said, "Hey, we have this new godless, insane ideology," and everybody would know, okay, Stalin is an insane megalomaniac who's surrounded by other insane sycophantic megalomaniacs, and he's a devil. We know he has already murdered millions of us, and for the foreseeable future, us and our children and their children are going to live under a brutal communist regime in which our cultures are destroyed, and we all have to take part of this brutalist, totalitarian dictatorship. And then you have Hitler, who was also an insane megalomaniac who surrounded himself with sycophants, but they would have seen, okay, Hitler wasn't blowing up our churches, wasn't blowing up churches in Germany. He wasn't murdering priests. Well, not yet. If you weren't Jewish, life actually, at least on the surface, seemed pretty good. And we know Hitler wants to destroy communism and Stalin. And so we have to choose, are we going to be on Team Stalin or Team Hitler? And, contrary to what people think, people weren't siding with Hitler because they were Jew-hating, insane people. Not all of them. Some of them were, of course, but not all. A lot of them were just, especially as Distributus points out, and as I've made very clear when I talk about the genocide, or I call it the ethnic cleansing of Prussia, is Germans who lived in Eastern Europe, everywhere from the Baltic to the Volga to the Danube, would know what would happen when the Red Army started marching in. Is the men would be murdered, the women would be raped, and the children would have been either murdered as well, and anybody else that survived would be expelled. And this, of course, did end up coming true as the Soviets started rolling in at the end of the war. And so I think a lot of the choice of ethnic Germans was, okay, Hitler is not going to do that, regardless of, even if, we don't even care about Hitler because we don't even live in Germany. We are Germans, and we know what the Soviets want to do to us, and we know that Hitler doesn't want to do that to us. So there's a choice they had to make. And the thing is, that choice was played out by the Finns, who the Soviets had already invaded in the Winter War, Hungarians, Romanians, Bulgarians, Slovaks, and much of the rest of Europe as well. The propaganda that you can see, the poster of the German with the lightning bolts going down on the Red Dragon, says Germany's victory is Europe's freedom, which the propaganda tried to paint this war as a crusade of Europe, of civilized Europe, against against the godless, barbaric, insane Soviets who wanted to spread communism to Europe because they wanted to spread communism to Europe. And a lot of the fears did end up coming true. Again, after the war, you don't really want to look up what the Soviets did to the German women or to the millions of Germans living east of the Oder, and subjugated it everywhere, kind of east of the Elbe and east of the Iron Curtain, to 50 years of a brutal communist regime, until Soviets, both due to kind of Western NATO pressure from the United States and from communism's own internal contradictions, collapsed not until the early 90s. And so again, a lot of the fears were justified, and people would have seen literally the only option we have to stop the Soviet Union is to work with Hitler, because he's kind of an unknown element. And again, German occupation on certain countries was a lot rougher than others. Obviously, Jews got the worst of it, Poles probably the second worst, and then but Western Europeans, Northern Europeans it was a pretty gentle occupation if you weren't Jewish. But anyways, my thought about this is that really, had literally any other right-wing or even center-right leader come in come into power in Germany at that time, they could have easily just led a truly united Europe to bring down the Soviet Union. Like, if, I don't know, say, like, if the Kaiser returned, or if, like, a military dictatorship that wasn't Hitler took over, or, you know, Konrad Adenauer, who was the leader of West Germany after the war, had taken power in the 30s, and, you know, Christian Democrats, or the center party in Germany, had taken power. You know, all it could have taken was the Soviets decide to invade Poland one day, all of Europe unites against it, and you get, like, Germany and France and everywhere else united against Soviets, and they probably would have won and brought them down. The thing is that, yes, I'm aware that there was, of course, atrocities caused by everyone, but the point is that there was also there was a huge number of tens of thousands of volunteers from all across Europe that saw this as their only chance to stop the Soviet Union. And, like, the picture above the propaganda is not the I was just talking about John 5. I'm talking about that right now, the fact that, you know, they saluted somebody who, they're just like, oh, he fought against the Russians, the Soviets. It's like, and then they didn't know anything about history, so they just assumed there was a Ukrainian independence war in the 40s. But yeah, the picture I have above is one of the more interesting characters, I think, of this is Andrei. As on the right is Andrei Vlasov, the Russian general the Soviet general who defected to the German side and formed the Russian Liberation Army, which I think at its height in 1943 was about 40,000 men. And again, their option was this is our only chance to stop Stalin, because again, our history just shows Hitler was the most evil person who ever lived, which he's up there certainly, but they've certainly downplay that Stalin was also one of the most evil people who ever lived, and the tens of millions of people of Eastern Europe were basically forced to choose between these two, and it was a hard choice for everybody, easier for some. And again, I'm not saying this to say that I wished Hitler had taken over Eastern Europe, because the problem is that either way, tens of millions of people were going to die. And that was the great tragedy of that massive struggle, which was the war in the Eastern Front. And so, the problem, again, is that people don't understand the nuance there. And I loved what Distributus kind of said, where it's like, if you're Ben Burgess and some intellectual who can sit there and say, hey, it's not hard to, like, make this choice of, are you a Nazi or are you not, when this was a real person who had to make this decision. And, you know, the fact that we have to have these witch hunts for centenarians or near centenarians, both, like, which at this point, you know, the only people left that could be complicit or they could try are, you know, people in their late 90s or 100s who would have been too young to actually be a higher officer responsible for any atrocities. So they're just like, oh, I was a secretary or I was a guard for 3 months, so I basically have to be put on trial now when I'm 98 years old. And, you know, that's the frustrating thing, right? Is just, you can't let this history go, but you also apparently don't even know the history. Like, World War II was not the black and white struggle that we make it out to be. Hitler was evil, but so was Stalin, and so were the Allied bombers that were firebombing Dresden. Now, of course, you know, I can still say there was heroism on both sides. Like, you have the fact that I'm not complaining about the Red Army either. Like, there were people who were also making the decision of, like, okay, you know, regardless of my own personal views on Stalin and communism, Germany is invading us, and they're led by somebody who has explicitly said he wants to destroy the Slavs. And, we are fighting for our homeland, for the motherland as well. And so I can't sit here and say, well, all of them it would have been an easy choice for all of the Slavs to just say, no, we're going to turn our back on Stalin and try and fight against Hitler, or fight for the Axis powers, even though, like, a different version of this, alternate history, I would have been a much easier choice, but sadly, the worst person basically took over Germany, other than, I suppose, an equally insane communist leader. So, with that said, like, we can move on to today, wherein people have to view war like it's a freaking Marvel movie. We do not live, we're not going to live in peaceful times that much longer, Charlie Adams, I don't know, but, yes, it is good that, I don't know, we've been involved in a lot of military conflicts. We're not in the mass deaths like World War I and II were, but we have nuclear weapons, and we're sparring with Russia, so that makes me kind of scared. But anyways, when you think war is this explicit black and white thing and it works like a Marvel movie, that's when you get the disgusting response to the war in Ukraine today. Because on the one hand, I'm like, okay, Russia aggressively invaded Ukraine because that's what powerful countries do. Because they said, okay, we want Eastern Ukraine because there are Russians there, and Ukraine was previously, until a few years ago, a Russian-friendly country, not too dissimilar to Belarus, that they are perfectly fine to live in peace. But now that they're now that it's pretty clear that Ukraine is a client state of the State Department of the West of NATO, Russia has increasingly felt boxed in. And I'm not really going to get into the reasons of the invasion, but what you have now is, of course, as Argent Templar points out with his videos on the Ukrainian cinematic universe, the fact that the Ukrainian government advertised in a trailer and was like making points to was like explicitly saying where they're going to make their spring counteroffensive. Like, why would you do that? And that they, of course, have this insane transgender person as, like, the Ukraine's military spokesperson in English. And, like, I'm all for patriotism and defending one's country, and, like, how this person will say, oh, we will use our blood to defend Ukrainian soil, with God on our side and all that. And my problem is that it's so fake. It's completely artificial nationalism, because you absolutely know that if the war ends tomorrow, and there's a general peace that leaves Zelensky in power, and they join NATO, they're immediately going to start going, we need to have gay marriage, we're going to let in mass immigration from Africa, we're going to be super liberal, and nationalism, oh, that's evil Nazi stuff. And so, this thing where the global American empire uses, like, nationalism, which is allowed for certain countries that benefit them to try and fight back against what enemies are left of NATO, but, of course, don't allow it in any of their own member states or allow it domestically. It's all completely fake. It's fake and it's gay. Sorry if I get demonetized for saying that, but yeah, that's true. And so that makes, again, I guess not to the same degree, certainly, as World War II, but the position Ukrainians are in is not enviable, because on the one hand, Russia is invading their country, and if Russia completely conquers Ukraine, which at this point I don't think they're going to be able to, I think unless, the Ukrainian lines completely start breaking and buckling over the next few months, which could happen, maybe. But, you know, Russia is invading their country, and they're like, okay, they're going to destroy our culture, our language, and our distinctive, who we are. Um, because Ukrainian is a distinct culture and language. It's not. It's very similar to Russian. It's obviously much similar to that than, say, Polish, but it is distinct enough for a lot of people. Um, at the same time, they're like, okay, so either A, we're conquered by Russia, or B, we are conquered by globalism, by liberalism. And in that case, well, our culture is also going to be destroyed because we're going to start mass pushing Western sexual ethics, which is, i.e., the sexual revolution. We're going to start having, support for gay marriage, transgenderism. I mean, their spokesperson is one, so I. And of course, they're going to start saying, well, hey, we want to make Ukraine a super prosperous Western country, and we've lost millions of our citizens because of the war. Well, what do Western modernized countries do? Well, they import millions and millions of people from the third world. So Ukrainians are gonna have to look forward to that if they win. And so it's not an enviable position at all. But yeah, that's generally what had to say about this. Uh, I've been kind of answering questions as I go along, but yeah. A brief aside as to what else I was gonna say is this is completely unrelated to this, but I've been really thinking a lot about class because I work tangential to blue collar. Like, the work I do in quality assurance isn't really blue collar. I'm doing mostly data entry and just inspection. Like, I'm not running machines, and I have like a desk in an office. But the thing is that having worked in this environment for a few years, I've realized, like, on the one hand, you're free from all the corporate HR wokeism, and if I was working alongside other people of my class, well-educated whites in and around the city, I'd probably find their political views to be insufferable. But I kind of find a lot of these rednecks to almost be probably as bad, if not worse, because there's two different types of rednecks and blue collar workers. There's the ones that I wish I worked with, which would be the conservative family men, evangelical Christians. I wish I was working with evangelical Christians because even though I disagree with them theologically, I'm Catholic now. Like, my parents are evangelicals, I was evangelical, and I'm like, even if they're not going to be the most articulate about things and be able to understand the most high concepts, I know this sounds very demeaning, but their hearts and souls are in the right place because they have themselves grounded in a genuine belief in God. They're grounded in God. The rednecks I worked with and work with are not that. They are I've heard the acronym before, but they're the DADs, the deraciated American dipshits. The ones that, I guess formally, all they cared about was, they're the kind of right-leaning, working-class version of the bugman consumer. The one who, they have to have the motorcycle or the truck, they have to have all the bumper stickers of guns, and, I hate Biden, but I still support all of his social policies. I guess formerly would have been drinking Bud Light, but they drink the cheap beer that can barely even be called beer. They want their porn, their beer, and their trucks as opposed to their porn, their weed, and their Funko Pops. They really don't believe in anything. And okay, I gotta say this, they're stupid. I hate saying this about a lot of my coworkers, but some of them, I mean, at my job, like, that there are basic things that you need that can be fixed if you just ask for them. So many of these people can't understand that connection of, like, hey, we need the sink fixed. Management, can you get a plumber? Okay, we'll send a plumber out today or tomorrow, and that's all you need. These people can't understand that. And so they'll just let their workstation and environment deteriorate until, until the very last second when they have to get it fixed, or they'll just let standards drop and drop and drop because they don't tell anybody. And it's connected to why I don't like populism, because you can't get a movement like this from the ground up. You need your aristocrats, you need your leadership, and you need smart people and cultured people. Like, I sound very snooty and kind of classist here, but I don't care. Like, I come from a higher middle class background, and you know what? I'm very blessed for it. Because I might not be making that much money, but, like, class, in my view, isn't even so much about money as it is your background and your upbringing and the way you carry yourself. Like, I think people have a basic right of dignity, that you don't have to work in squalor. You know, now you don't see a lot of rich, low-class people, because the examples of that is people that win the lottery, and then have no idea how to manage money, so they just waste it all and are back to square one within a few months. Which, again, it's something I've noticed at, like, my workplace is, oh, everybody's chipping in money for the Powerball every day, and, like, just, like, the lottery is a tax on stupid people. Smart people don't play the lottery. Like, the only, like, higher end people that do gambling are, like, top tier, like, professional poker players, right? Wherein it's not even about the luck, right? They're not there because they're lucky. They're there because they are very skilled at the game and can read people. Whereas, like a funny story I have is, like, when I go to the liquor store, like, there's two types of people that go there. Well, okay, there's people that want to buy alcohol, which is everybody. And, you know, but then, and you know, some of them are kind of more put together. Some of them are like me. I'm kidding. You know, but everybody who's there that buys lottery tickets, none of them look happy and none of them look put together. Like, I really want gambling like that to not be legal. Like, I think it's predatory. I think it's abusive and exploitative on poor people. And, of course, the government gets to make more tax money off of it for whoever does win. Like, it's a complete waste of money. I do not gamble at all. Like, I don't want to even tempt myself with that. Like, if you people actually get rich either because they're born out of it or they're smart. And so that's just kind of what my personal just stuff I'm dealing with is that, like, the other older boomer that I work with, and again, I'm not here just to complain about work, but here I am. I talked for a while, like almost an hour or something, about World War II. You can listen to me complain about work for a minute. This guy that is my other coworker in the quality assurance department, he's like, just will start talking to me. He's like in his early 60s, and he's just like, hey, you know, you should start thinking about property or something. And it's like, uh-huh. It's like, yeah, I have like a brother who's, you know, after he got divorced, because they're boomers, of course, they always get divorced. Like, he, you know, 25,000, he got his little property, got a trailer built there. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. If that's what apparently I have to look forward to in terms of property ownership, is I can get a little cuck shed. Mm-hmm. Like, my thought is that, okay, everybody wants to own a house because owning property is not only an investment, but, you know, it's your house. It's kind of a very nice dream people have. Um, Hopefully, with the money I'm making now, I can afford it in the next decade or so. I am on the road to being able to afford a house. I would like, a condo or like a little townhouse. I hate like lawn management and all that. Like, I find like watering plants or something, but I don't want to mow a lawn. I hate doing that. And, but it's like if my choice is either to be trailer trash, living in a little dinky shack, but it's mine. I get that, but no, I'd still prefer, like a nice 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. But I'm kind of just more rambling more than I usually do. But that's kind of my spiel there of both, my views on World War II, Ukraine, and just kind of my anger towards the class that I am burdened with working with, which I feel like I'd almost be better as a floor manager of being able to actually just communicate with them and understanding, okay, you know, organize it. But that's about it. Um, Anything news coming up? I might try a game stream at some point, but I wanted to get something out because I want to. Hopefully I'll be speaking with Distributist again for our yearly. I wish it was more than yearly live stream. I trying to figure out how to meet more people in real life. I recently ordered Pathfinder Second Edition, which in short is like an alternative D&D system. I would love to be able to organize like a D&D or Pathfinder podcast to have on the show, on the channel, but I really want to learn all the rules. And in the TTRPGs I've played, I really don't like being a DM. It's much more fun playing, but you know, having it is better than nothing. So that's what I'm working on. Have a good night, and I'll see y'all later.